I guess the most valuable lesson I learned during the student movement, because I was reluctant to get involved, because my mother insisted, don't you get involved there because you're going to get locked up. But I had met this girl at Clark who was a freshman, and I was a freshman, and she was from South Carolina. So I decided to take her to the Fox Theater to see a movie. And I had been going to the Fox when I was in high school. And that particular day, we went to the Fox, and we had to go to the side door and go all the steps. And I'm trying to impress. And she said, why do we have to come up all these steps? And that's what decided me, we need to do something about this, you know. And, and that's when I got involved. Ben Brown, who was the leader, like at Clark, was the president of the student body, and he had approached me the year before, my freshman year, because we didn't get involved in the movement until '61. And they were organized, Julian Bond, Ben Brown, Lonnie King. And I sort of really said, no, I'm not going to do that. But I guess November of '60, after we had gone to the movement, I volunteered to be a part of the movement. And I realized then the importance of what we were doing, you know. And so that's how I got involved.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the importance of it, because certainly for a young person, 18, 19, 20 years old, that's a big risk to take. You're in college, you're getting your
Right.
education. You know, let's give me your opinion on really what that meant for not just you, but the group as a whole.
Yeah, well, we discussed in our meetings what would happen if you got locked up, how would it affect you when you finished college, because then you had a record for being in jail. And that was one of my parents' concerns. But you know, the first march I participated in, it was around Richard's department store at that time. And that maybe was the second march, but we had a line all the way around Richard's. And this white lady drove up and let this black lady out in her uniform and told her to go in to buy something for her. So the lady got her, and she just happened to come up to where I was. At that day, I was a team captain. I need to explain that later on. And she said, I don't want to go in there, but Miss So-and-so said I need to be there, and I'm worried about my job. But when she got there, she stopped, and she refused to go in. And that meant a lot to me, because I'm sure when she got back, they fired her. Because Miss Mary, whatever her name was, wasn't crossing the line, but she was going to send this black lady across. And she refused to go. And so that sold it for me right at that point. That was it. I said, got to keep doing it, Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about what it meant being a team captain. What was involved
Well,
in that?
the team captain's major problem was, after the first march, we discovered that Captain Little, who was this mean white police officer, would sort of harass you if you got too close because he said you were obstructing the entrance to the place. So we had to have like 3 feet between us as we marched. So the team captain was, well, it was more than that, because what we did the night before, we would use a chalkboard and outline the streets and the stores that we were going to picket. And our job was, once we got down there, because normally we would have 700, 800 students that would show up. Before we left campus, the team captain said we got Broad Street around Richard, or Forsyth Street. Well, then once we got there and dispersed, everybody that was under my team followed me to wherever we were going. So they were split up. Because once we started marching, they got all intermingled. So we said, hey, Billy has team captain A. So A team, when you get downtown, everybody go to A, which is going to Broad Street or Forsyth Street, wherever the street was.
Okay. Were you involved at the Quadrangle? They had about 2,000 students that met up at the library, and they marched to the Georgia State Capitol.
No, I was not involved in that.
Okay. And any memories about Warren Memorial United Methodist Church?
What about that?
Warren, and just how it's related to the movement. I know meetings and things were.
Yeah, basically that was it. We just had meetings in there. Because when we met, see, we had students from Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, and Morris Brown, and we found out the classroom, first we would meet at Morehouse or somewhere. It was easy to meet in a church because it had more room in there. So basically that's it.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about the Atlanta Inquirer, just what it being a major vehicle for the students and getting the messaging out.
Yeah, I think basically the Inquirer informed the black community, hey, those students are doing something that's going to benefit this community. Follow them, listen to what they have to say. And for the most part, the people did. They did not cross that picket line.
Okay. Did you have any dealings with either Mr. Hollowell or Howard Moore, both attorneys?
Right, not Howard Moore, but I did deal with, but I did have something, he would speak to the group on occasion and tell us, what we were to do. Because when the movement started, we were not planning to go to jail. We were just going to march. And so we really didn't need to worry about legal at that point. But once we decided to, hey, we're going to send students to jail, then we needed the legal advice. Because I think if you remember the history of Atlanta, maybe 1 week was the most any student from the Atlanta area went to jail. And after that, they said, hey, this is a city too busy to hate. But it was about 80 students that were locked up, and I was not one of those,
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the importance of working to desegregate the municipal facilities, the restaurants, the hotels, just to live a normal life here in the city.
Well, that's one of the things my dad talked to me about when I told him I was going to participate. He said, if you go to college, you need to improve things for you, your children, and your children's children. And so that was my goal, And I insisted that to even my kids, hey, in order to appreciate those things and be able to use them, you're going to have to get an education to do it. Because, see, when I grew up, we couldn't go to the Magnolia Room at Richards. We couldn't eat in a restaurant downtown, even though if you had the money. And what the people didn't realize, had they let us eat at the Magnolia Room, most of us couldn't afford it. We had to turn around anyway. We didn't have money to eat in there. So it was like a big, big you-know-what. You fought for it, just for that right to go if you could go. And so it worked out for us. And the movement didn't last that long either,
What do you attribute that to?
A lot of people won't give him credit, but I attribute a lot of it to a former mayor named William Hartsfield. Hartsfield, I don't think, was so much in favor of integration, but he loved Atlanta, I think. And he wanted to make sure that this city got everything that it needed. And he knew that movement would hurt the city. And it seemed like it was either Senator Leroy Johnson or Hollowell that mentioned to us once that Hartsfield is the one who got the business and said, look, you all let those kids eat because we don't want that blight on our record as a city. And so it was one of those things where, I don't know, we felt it at that time, and went through it with it.
Let me ask you, from the time that you were involved, what is your most favorite memory, good memory of working with the other students during this time?
I guess my favorite moment, though, is the little old lady I was telling you about. I always remember that lady. And when I talk about it, I always feel something out here, Oh, it was rough. Excuse me. Sorry about that. But that was my favorite memory of seeing that lady refuse to cross that line. I'm sorry.
But you do realize that seeing you all there gave her the strength to do that.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. Because She came down to go in, but she refused to go. That was powerful. That was powerful.
Any, any dealings with Grady Memorial during
No.
during that time?
No, we didn't really worry about the hospital at that point. Yeah, no.
Okay, all right. What would be the one major takeaway that you would want someone in our age group to know about you all as students during that time?
I think what I would really want them to know is that most of us could not afford to eat at the Magnolia Room. But we wanted it so that our children could eat at the Magnolia if they wanted to, or our grandchildren to be able to go there when they wanted to. See, I went to school here in Atlanta, and when I was in school, Turner High, this is where I went to high school, was green and white, and there was a school called O'Keefe that was on Georgia Tech campus. And we used Turner High students got O'Keefe's pass-me-down books when O'Keefe got new books. And we knew it because the kid's name would be in the books. And one of the things the teachers taught us at Turner, it may be old, but if you learn it, you can make it, you know. And so, I don't know. I just want them to know that you can do anything you want to do if you decide to do it. You know?
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Add.
Just in general about the movement?
The only thing I can add is that I know that maybe 10% of the students who participated in the movement at that time were not dedicated. They just followed, you know, they just went along with us. But it worked out, though. It really worked out. And like I said, I attribute Mayor Hartsfield for a lot of that success.
But it also took, if you think about it, I mean, just a mindset of, you know, fellow students working out a plan.
Right,
together.
yeah,
I
they
mean,
did.
that's something that's certainly honorable
Oh,
and
yeah, it is. Mm-hmm.
difficult.
Right, because but you know, I thank the professors at that time that were in their youth center, because once those kids, what we would do would be organized. We said the night before, they would notify the team captains that we're gonna march. Then we had designated area on each campus. If you were part of Team A, you went to this section, and they would always start by singing hymns. Then they would start singing "We Shall Overcome," and they would start at Spelman Gate, come down what was then Chestnut Street, pick up the students from Clark and Morehouse, go on up to Hunter Street, MLK now, go up past Morris Brown and the bridge, and we would pick up those students. And once they started singing, marching, the professors would hear that song, they would close their books, walk out the door, because they know we were gone. It's still rough, though. You know, I talk about it, yes, boom. And I didn't even go to jail, you know. So. But that's life. Mm-hmm.
It is. Any anecdotes, memories of Julian as a leader, as a young leader?
You know, Julian was one of those guys who was a deep thinker. And he came up with a lot of the ideas that we instituted. I remember Julian was the one that came up with the idea of putting the street. They actually drew rectangular shape for the buildings. And we had discovered after maybe the first or second March that a lot of the places would close, but as soon as we left, they would open up. So Julian came up with the idea that, hey, we didn't have cell phone. We got a two-way radio. and we would have students. Now, Julian came up to have students assigned, and very few of us had cars, but the ones that had cars would circle downtown, and if we saw that the restaurant was opening again after we left, they would call back, and we would send the group down there, And it was his idea, because as soon as we left, they opened up again, and he had that idea. And the idea that he came up with was not, kind of blocking off the street. He actually wrote the street name. And I can recall one day, Ben was leading a group around, and we got to the end of Forsyth Street, which was Old Richards, and we were going to go up. And the Captain Little told us, you can't go up that street, which is Old Hunter Street. And he said, why? And that's when the movement said I would go to jail. Because he refused to turn us around at that spot. They locked him up, or they took him to jail. Then they let him go. All we wanted to do was, we had enough students to go all the way around the whole building, but they wanted us to go keep us on one street. And after that particular incident, they decided, hey, we're going to go to jail because we're going to go around. And I think that's the day they locked up maybe about 75, 80 students. And they stayed in jail for 1 week. And the professors sent the books down, and they studied while they were in school, But it's sort of touching to think and then I regret that I didn't do it earlier, because I used to, go to the Fox when I was in high school, go up all those steps, and never thought about it until that girl said, it's a lot of steps, And I said, man, it is a lot of steps. Why do we have to go around to that back? But Ben was one of my big influences too, though, Ben Brown, because I had known Ben before. He was at Clark when I was at Turner, but we had a jazz band, and we played at a lot of the clubs, and a lot of the white clubs. So he would tell me what they were planning to do beforehand. And he was the first one to say, look, you need to join us. And I kind of refused at first. But I'm glad now that I got involved. Yeah, I really am. That is a sad part of my life. It's sad that we had to go through that, And my dad, who was a person who didn't talk much, had fought in World War II. And then he only told me during the movement about some of the things he had experienced. So he was for it, But that was it. Basically, that was it. Like I said, I get teary sometimes just talking about it or thinking about it. Because I didn't have the only negative thing I had was this guy, Captain Little, and I can't remember the sergeant, actually tripped me up walking on the street one day. And when I fell, he said, you were blocking this doorway. But he knew he hadn't tripped me, But I got him and kept going, so that was the end of that. He didn't bother me. A lot of my friends went to jail, and fraternity brothers. But that was it. It was a good time in Atlanta at that point, so we made it. Mm.
Did any of them share for them what it was like while they were in there?
Oh, yeah, they didn't have any problem at all because most of them were confined in room cells together. And they could study, have study sessions, so they were treated well. They were treated extremely well. And we didn't know it at the time, but they had worked it out through, I guess, SCLC for somebody to pay the bond, and they refused to. And we didn't know it, but Dr. Warner and Jesse Hill put up that money to get us out of jail, get them out of jail. And so, we didn't know that at that point because they kind of stayed away from us. But Julian and Melania King and Ben Brown they were the heroes of that movement. They really were. And Julian was a deep, deep thinker, And he was ahead of his time. He could sit down and plan out things for 2 years, and it was just like that, pop right in place, So I admired him a lot because he was maybe 2 or 3 years older than I was, and he was thinking deep at that point, And then his dad was deep, So Dr. Bond taught me in graduate school. So he got it naturally, And I think his dad maybe talked to him a lot. And probably helped him come up with those ideas. But he had it together. He really did. And I think he was dating Alice at the time. They weren't married. He was just dating her. So. But he was a good guy, though, Julian. He was.
How would you say, like, when there seemed to have been some positive changes happening because of the student movement, when things started to unlock and become a little bit free-flowing, it didn't happen all at once, but just nugget by nugget, how did that make you all feel?
You know, I can recall the first time, maybe this was like 64, 65, that I actually went to a restaurant to eat downtown. And it was amazing, the feeling I got. Even though I got stares, it just felt good to be able to walk in there and order what I wanted to. And I think that was maybe 64. Because like I said, we didn't have money when we were in college to even go there. And had they just said, come on, sit down, we'd have to turn around. You know, we didn't have any money. But it was, and it got a little better each year. You know, you could do a little more. And the more I made, the more I could do. And so it went well. Now, it was like that until, what, maybe 69, before you could really feel that kind of comfortable by going in places, because you knew you would be a minority wherever you went. And I stress that to my kids. Get your education so you can do what you want to do. And you can afford to do what you want to do.
Would you like to add anything?
No, I think that's it. Because really, I started talking about it, I get cheery. But let me just add this to one. I worked for the board, Atlanta Public School, for 30 years. And I was a part of the desegregation of the schools here. And I can recall when they were supposed to determine who would be transferred to white schools by your last 3 digits of your Social Security number. Well, we questioned how that was done because, well, I was one of those chosen. And I can remember this guy had a white area superintendent named Dr. G. Y. Smith. They assigned me to a white school, no black students, no black teachers. And I went to him and said, look, I don't want to go. He said, why? I said, I'm happy where I am. He pulled out my record. He had my personnel file. He said, I see where you participate in the student movement. You fought for this. Now you don't want to be a part of it. I said, that man has the right idea. I went on and integrated, you know. And so it has followed me through the years, you know. And that was a good experience, you know. And the school they transferred me to too. First year I went, maybe we had 1 black student. Next year, we had about 40% of the school black. Next year, it was all black. Principal resigned, assistant principal resigned, and the faculty went half and half, you know. And that's E.L. Conley over there in West Haven, West End, Atlanta now. It was all white when I went there. That whole area, there were no blacks over there at all. And so I said, well, I'll be done. And in 3 years, it had gone from all white to all black. 3 years. But G.Y. taught me a lesson, though. I had fought for it and not refusing to participate in it. So I said, well, he's right. I'm going on over there. And it was a nice experience. Even though the first 3 weeks, maybe every parent in the neighborhood was there to see us come in and see who we were and see how we were going to react, you know. But after that, they left. And so things went to normal. But it was a good experience. It was a good experience. Growing up in Atlanta has been wonderful, you know, so. I remember we only had 1 black park, 2, Mosley Park and Washington Park. And if you couldn't go there to swim, you didn't swim, you know, so. And I can remember dealing with City Hall when it was all white. My dad was a contractor. He built houses. And I used to come down with him, and he had time getting permits and things, you know. It's much nicer now when you do it. It's much nicer. Just to see a black face behind that counter. Because when I came in today, I was surprised. All these often, all these, I don't come down here much. I said, look, all these black faces. Oh, I felt good, you know. But that's it, though. That's basically it.
Okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and grab